The world had already fallen silent. The once bustling streets of major cities across Earth now lay in ruins. Skyscrapers, which once touched the heavens, now stood as broken remnants, mere shadows of their former glory. Smoke rose from the crumbled remains of civilization, the air thick with the stench of defeat. The sound of alien ships, their sleek metallic forms cutting through the sky, was constant. The humans had fought valiantly, but the alien invaders were too powerful, too advanced. Earth had lost the war, and no one was left to challenge them. Every day, the aliens scoured the streets, hunting down the last of humanity. The humans had become little more than ghosts, hiding in the shadows, waiting for the inevitable end. The Earth had been conquered, its resources plundered, and its cities destroyed. What had once been a thriving, vibrant planet was now nothing more than a battleground, a world left for the taking by an unstoppable force. But there was one human left, one survivor. Jason Hunter, a soldier by training, a survivor by choice, was still out there. He had watched his friends die, his comrades fall in battle, and his family perish under the aliens' unrelenting assault. Yet through it all, he refused to surrender. His heart ached with every memory of his fallen loved ones, but something deep inside him kept pushing him forward. He knew that as long as he was alive, there was still hope. Jason was not like the others. While most people had given up, resigned to their fate, Jason kept going. He didn't have superhuman strength or alien technology. He was just an ordinary human. But there was something that the invaders didn't understand about humanity, something that made them more dangerous than they could ever imagine. For days, Jason had wandered through the desolate streets, taking shelter in the ruins of his hometown. He had lived through the worst of the invasion, witnessing the fall of cities, the collapse of governments, and the defeat of entire armies. The aliens, with their advanced technology and superior firepower, had conquered every stronghold, destroyed every defense. But there was one thing they never expected. Jason knew it, but the invaders hadn't a clue. He paused at the edge of a broken building, staring out at the alien fleet hovering above. The ships were huge, their forms hovering ominously in the sky. There were hundreds of them, their engines humming with a low, powerful vibration. The aliens had won, and they knew it. They had wiped out Earth's military forces, shattered its defenses, and reduced the population to a small group of survivors. They were in control, and they believed the war was over. Jason's eyes narrowed as he studied the ships above. He could feel his heart racing, the blood pumping in his veins. He had come to realize something over the past few days, something that had kept him alive even in the darkest moments. The aliens thought they had already won. They thought they had conquered humanity, but they had overlooked something. Something so simple, yet so powerful, that it could turn the tide of the entire war. Jason stood tall, his fists clenched, his mind racing with a plan. He wasn't sure how it would work, but he knew it was the only chance humanity had. He was going to make them realize the mistake they had made. If he could get close enough, if he could find a way to make them understand, he could turn the tables on the invaders. The aliens had underestimated humanity's greatest strength, the will to survive. For a moment, Jason closed his eyes and let the silence wash over him. It was the kind of silence that only came after destruction, the kind of silence that spoke of loss and heartbreak. But in that silence, Jason found clarity. His mind was clear, focused. He thought about everything he had lost, the friends, the family, the life he once knew, and something stirred inside him. There was a fire in him, one that refused to die. He had seen so many people give up. He had seen them lose hope, surrender to the aliens without a fight. But Jason refused to do that. He was not going to let the aliens destroy everything, not without a fight, and not without showing them just how strong humans could be, even in the face of defeat. With a deep breath, Jason turned away from the wreckage of his city and began to move toward the heart of the alien invasion. He had no weapons, no army to back him up. It was just him against the entire alien fleet. But he didn't care. He was driven by something stronger than fear, hope, and the belief that humans could survive, no matter how bleak the situation seemed. He had one rule, a rule that had been passed down through the generations, a rule that he had always followed, and one that the aliens had no idea existed. The aliens had thought they could crush humanity, destroy it with their advanced technology and overwhelming force. They thought that by wiping out Earth's military and resources, they would break the spirit of the people. They didn't understand what made humans different. They didn't know what it meant to fight for something greater than survival. And that was their mistake. Jason knew that the key to defeating the aliens lay in rule number 1. It was a rule that no alien could ever comprehend, a rule that had been ingrained in the human spirit since the beginning of time. It wasn't about technology or weapons. It was about something deeper, something that the invaders couldn't see or understand. It was about heart. And that was something the aliens could never take away. As he walked through the wreckage, Jason felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. But he also felt something else, a sense of determination, a spark of hope that refused to die. The aliens had underestimated humans, and Jason was going to show them just how wrong they were. He wasn't sure how he was going to do it, but he knew one thing. As long as he was alive, Earth wasn't lost. The night air was cold, and the streets were eerily empty, but Jason didn't stop. He knew the risks. He knew that the aliens would stop at nothing to hunt him down, but he also knew that the human spirit could not be crushed so easily. He had seen it before. He had seen ordinary people rise to extraordinary heights when they had nothing left to lose. And now he had nothing left to lose. It was just him and the alien fleet, and Jason was going to make them regret underestimating humanity. He was going to make them realize that rule number 1 was not something they could ignore. They had thought they had already won, but Jason was about to prove them wrong. As the alien ships loomed overhead, their lights flashing in the darkness, Jason made his way toward their headquarters. He had no plan, no backup. But he had one thing the aliens didn't, the power of human resolve. And with that, he was ready to face whatever came next. He wasn't alone. As long as he had hope, the human race still had a chance. And Jason was going to fight with every ounce of strength he had left to show the aliens that humanity wasn't ready to give up just yet. The real battle was only just beginning. Jason Hunter moved deeper into the ruined city, his steps echoing through the abandoned streets. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional hum of alien ships as they patrolled above. His mind was focused, his heart pounding with each step. He couldn't afford to waste time. Every second counted, and the stakes had never been higher. The last hope for humanity rested in his hands, and it was a burden he had learned to carry. The once thriving metropolis had been reduced to rubble. Skyscrapers that once reached for the sky now lay in twisted heaps of steel and concrete. Streets that had been filled with laughter, chatter, and life were now desolate, covered in dust and ash. The earth had changed beyond recognition. It had become a shell of what it once was, a planet marked by alien conquest. Yet in the midst of all this destruction, Jason held on to a single truth. Humanity wasn't defeated. Not yet. It wasn't the advanced alien weaponry or their vast fleets that made Jason so sure of this. It wasn't the soldiers or the weapons that had failed him. It was something far more fundamental, a rule that had been passed down through the generations of humans, something the aliens could never understand, a rule that would be the key to their downfall. The alien forces had wiped out Earth's defenses in a matter of weeks. They had stripped the planet of its resources, dismantled its armies, and sent humanity into hiding. The few remaining survivors were nothing more than ghosts in their own homes. But Jason had learned one thing in the chaos of the invasion. Humans had something the aliens couldn't anticipate. It wasn't something physical. It wasn't a weapon or a strategy. It was an unshakable will to fight. Jason wasn't special in the conventional sense. He wasn't a genius or a master strategist. But he was human, and that gave him an edge the aliens could never comprehend. They had thought they could break humanity's spirit, thought they could crush everything we held dear. But they were wrong. Deep inside, there was a power in humans that was impossible to erase. Jason stopped and looked up at the darkened sky. The alien ships, with their eerie green lights, glided smoothly through the atmosphere. They seemed so invincible, so untouchable. But Jason wasn't scared. He was angry. Angry at what they had done to his world, to his people. He had lost everything. His family, his friends, his future. And yet, he couldn't give up. He refused to let his world slip into oblivion. He had to keep going, no matter the odds. His eyes scanned the wreckage around him, taking in the destruction. It was like the city had been hit by a massive storm. Only this storm had been an alien invasion. It had been systematic, ruthless, and efficient. There was nothing left to fight for, it seemed, except for rule number 1. This rule wasn't something the aliens knew about. In fact, they were blind to it, unable to even recognize its existence. Rule number 1 was humanity's greatest weapon, and it was what had kept Jason going since the invasion had started. He had heard stories about it when he was a child, stories told by old veterans and survivors. The rule had been passed down through generations, always whispered as a secret. No one had ever truly understood its full power until now. Jason clenched his fists as memories of the past flooded his mind. He remembered his father telling him stories about the old days, about the times when humanity had fought against impossible odds and won. His father would always say, "Never forget the first rule." At the time, Jason had thought it was just a saying, a piece of advice. But now he knew it was more than that. Rule number 1 was the key to everything. It wasn't about technology, strength, or power. It was about something far more dangerous: the will to survive. As he moved deeper into the heart of the city, Jason felt a sudden shift in the air. The alien ships above him seemed to notice his presence. They began to descend slowly, their engines humming with intensity. They were searching for him, scanning every inch of the city. The aliens were relentless in their pursuit of the last humans. But Jason was ready. He had trained for moments like this. The city's remains were a maze of crumbling buildings and twisted metal, a labyrinth where danger could be lurking at every corner. But Jason was no stranger to these streets. He knew every alley, every abandoned building, every hiding spot. He had been living in this ruin for weeks, always one step ahead of the aliens. They thought they could catch him, but they didn't know how human persistence worked. Jason crouched behind the remnants of an old shopping mall, his breath steady and controlled. The alien ships were getting closer now. He could hear their engines grow louder as they flew overhead, scanning the city below. Jason knew that the time to act was drawing near. He had come this far. There was no turning back now. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small device, a piece of equipment he had scavenged from an abandoned military base. It wasn't much, but it was all he had left. The device could hack into the aliens' communications network, allowing him to interfere with their command systems. If he could disrupt their communications, he could buy humanity a little more time. Time they desperately needed to rise up. But Jason's plan wasn't just about survival. It was about sending a message that humanity was still alive, still fighting, and still capable of resisting. He wasn't just going to hide in the shadows and wait for death. He was going to make the aliens see that they had made a mistake in underestimating humanity. As Jason carefully moved toward the alien fleet, his mind was sharp, his movements calculated. He had learned to survive in a world where every moment was a battle. But rule number 1 was what kept him alive. And soon, the aliens would learn that it was a rule they could never overcome. The night was quiet again, the city holding its breath as Jason closed the distance between him and the alien fleet. His heart raced in his chest, but his focus was unwavering. He had one shot, and he wasn't going to waste it. The aliens had thought they had already won, but Jason was about to show them that humanity wasn't finished, not by a long shot, and the war was far from over. With every step he took, he felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. But he also felt something else, a sense of purpose, a belief in something greater than himself. For the first time since the invasion had begun, Jason felt like he had a chance to make a real difference. This was humanity's final stand, and Jason was ready to lead the charge. Jason crouched low as he moved through the broken city, keeping to the shadows and staying out of sight. The ruins of buildings loomed like ghostly sentinels, their shattered windows staring back at him as though they, too, were watching the alien ships above. He could hear their engines growling softly, a constant reminder that the invaders were ever present. The sound of their patrols was almost a comfort now. He had become used to it, but there was no room for complacency. Not now. Not when humanity's future was on the line. Jason's hand gripped the small device in his pack, the one piece of tech that could make all the difference. It was a crude hack into the aliens' communication system, a signal jamming tool that, if used correctly, could sever their ability to coordinate. The aliens were highly organized, their machines able to communicate instantaneously, but that reliance on technology also meant that a simple disruption could send them into chaos. Jason had seen it before, back in the earlier days of the invasion. They weren't invincible. They had weaknesses, just like anyone else. And now he was going to exploit one of them. The path ahead was narrow, a gap between two collapsed buildings. He could feel the faint vibrations in the ground as the alien ships circled overhead, their attention focused on other parts of the city. Jason didn't know how much longer that would last, but he couldn't afford to waste any more time. The device needed to be planted in a central location where the alien signal was strongest, deep in the heart of their command base. It was risky, incredibly so, but Jason was prepared. He had made it this far. There was no turning back now. He couldn't help but think back to the early days of the invasion, the days when he and his fellow soldiers had fought bravely against the alien forces. The first few days had been chaos, with humans scrambling to defend their cities and their families. At first, no one believed the aliens would win. They couldn't. The human race had always fought back against invaders, whether it was foreign armies, viruses, or natural disasters. Humans had always found a way to survive. But then the aliens arrived. Their ships, their weapons. Everything was so far beyond human technology. It was as though they had stepped out of a science fiction story. And then it happened. The global defense networks failed. Every major city fell. The alien forces had overwhelmed the Earth's military in mere weeks, leaving nothing but burning rubble behind. Jason had been there, in the heart of the chaos. He had seen friends fall, his own comrades crushed under the weight of the enemy's onslaught. He had heard the desperate cries of civilians as they were rounded up and carted away by the aliens. It was all so fast, so final. At that point, Jason had almost given up, just like everyone else. But one thing had kept him going, a promise to himself. He would never surrender. He would never let the aliens wipe out humanity's spirit, no matter how many had already fallen. Deep inside, Jason knew that the invaders had miscalculated. They didn't understand what humans were capable of when they had nothing left to lose, and that was why Jason was still alive. He had one simple, unshakable rule to follow. Rule number 1, never give up. It was a rule his father had taught him, a lesson he had learned from watching his family survive through hardship after hardship. It was more than just a mantra. It was a way of life. Jason had held on to that rule as the world fell apart around him. It had kept him alive when everything seemed hopeless, and now it was the key to defeating the aliens. As Jason neared the alien base, his breathing slowed and his senses heightened. Every corner could be a potential trap, every shadow a hiding enemy. But he didn't stop. The thought of the survivors hiding out there, the last few humans scattered across the earth, kept him moving. They were waiting for someone to show them the way, to give them hope that the human race wasn't finished. Jason was their last hope. He crept closer to the alien command center, which was housed in the remains of a massive government building that had once been a symbol of Earth's power. Now it was a twisted shell, its steel beams bent and broken, its walls scarred by alien weapons. The place was heavily guarded, but Jason knew this was his chance. He had studied the alien patrols for days, learning their patterns, observing the slightest weaknesses in their defenses. They had no idea he was coming, and that would give him the edge he needed. The alien ships above were beginning to shift, their patterns becoming erratic. Jason's heart skipped a beat. He knew they were preparing for a sweep of the area. Time was running out. He had to act quickly. He slipped into the shadows behind a ruined wall and waited, watching the alien guards as they moved in unison, their cold, mechanical eyes scanning the area. They seemed to move without emotion, without fear, like machines programmed to follow orders. But that was the thing the aliens never understood. They thought they could control everything. They thought they could bend the human spirit to their will. But they hadn't counted on one thing. When humans fight back, it's not just about fighting for survival. It's about fighting for something greater. Humans didn't just fight to stay alive. They'd fought for each other. They fought for their families, for their homes, for the future. And that was something the aliens could never replicate. Jason's eyes locked onto the nearest alien guard. He was standing just a few feet away, his back turned to Jason. It was now or never. Moving silently, Jason slipped out of his hiding spot, keeping his movements fluid and quiet. He crept behind the alien guard and, with a swift motion, knocked him out cold, taking care to drag his body behind the wall before it could be noticed. Jason's pulse raced as he approached the heart of the command center. The central communications hub was just ahead, guarded by more alien soldiers. But Jason was ready. He had the advantage of surprise, and he was going to use it. With a quick glance to ensure no one else was near, he reached into his pack and pulled out the jamming device. His hands were steady as he placed it in the middle of the room, positioning it perfectly to disrupt the alien signals. Jason didn't have much time. He activated the device, and instantly, the alien command center's communication network began to flicker. The lights above him blinked erratically, and the quiet hum of the alien machines grew louder. Jason smiled. He could already see the confusion setting in. The aliens would be forced to rely on their own instincts now, and that was where humans had the advantage. As the jamming device continued to work, Jason knew this was his chance. He had done it. He had given humanity a fighting chance. Now, all he had to do was make it out alive. With the alien fleet thrown into disarray, the human survivors could regroup and prepare for the final push. But as Jason turned to leave, he froze. A noise echoed through the broken halls. Footsteps, alien footsteps. The soldiers had discovered the disturbance. They were coming. His heart raced, but Jason didn't panic. He had come too far. Rule number 1 was still alive, and as long as that rule guided him, there was no enemy too strong to defeat. He moved quickly, his every step calculated as he made his way back through the crumbling city. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time since the invasion, Jason believed that humanity still had a fighting chance. The aliens thought they had already won, but they hadn't counted on one human, and one rule that would make all the difference. Jason's heart was racing now, his every step echoing in the deserted corridors of the alien command center. The vibrations from the jamming device still hummed in the air, disrupting the once perfect coordination of the alien forces. He had done it. He had interrupted their communication grid, bought humanity the precious time they needed. But as he moved swiftly toward the exit, he knew his time was running out. The aliens would realize soon enough that someone had infiltrated their stronghold. They were coming for him. He didn't have much time to escape. The walls around him seemed to close in, the haunting sound of alien footsteps getting closer, louder. The flickering lights above cast strange shadows that danced like ghosts in the half-darkness. Jason knew he was close to being cornered, but panic wasn't an option. He had trained for moments like this, back when the war seemed like a distant nightmare. The stakes were higher now, but the training still held. It was all about remaining calm, staying focused. Turning a sharp corner, He darted into an old utility room, its metal door hanging loosely on its hinges. He had to think quickly. His breath was coming in short gasps now, but his mind was still sharp. Jason knew that if he could make it out of the alien base, there was still a chance. The disruption he had caused would give the survivors a window of opportunity to mount a counterattack. The aliens would be distracted, their technology temporarily useless. Humanity had a fighting chance again. He crouched behind a pile of rubble, his back pressed against the cold metal of the walls, and held his breath. Through a crack in the door, he saw the alien patrols move past. They were searching for him. Their glowing, insect-like eyes scanned the room, their movements eerily precise. Jason could feel his pulse in his throat, but he didn't move. Not even an inch. His entire body screamed to flee, but he stayed still. The aliens had no idea where he was, and that's how it had to stay. He waited for what felt like an eternity, the tension in the room thick and oppressive. Finally, after what felt like hours, the footsteps grew distant. They had passed him by, their attention focused on other areas of the base. Jason let out a quiet breath of relief, but he didn't allow himself the luxury of rest. Not yet. He couldn't afford to relax, not until he was safely out of the alien stronghold and back with the survivors. Slowly, he rose from his crouch, checking every direction before moving. The coast was clear, for now. He had learned the art of patience during the war, and now, more than ever, it was vital to remain undetected. His eyes flicked to the exit, the way out. It wasn't far, but there were still alien patrols in the vicinity. Jason knew he would have to make it through the heart of the base without drawing attention. He moved silently, his footfalls barely audible against the wreckage of the once pristine facility. Every corner seemed to offer another obstacle, another chance for him to be spotted. But his instincts were sharp. He had learned to read the patterns of the alien forces, their movements, their timing. Every inch of the base felt like a deadly puzzle that only he could solve. Jason was almost at the final stretch. The exit was just ahead, a long corridor that led to the surface, where the alien ships hovered ominously above. He could almost taste the fresh air, feel the weight of the world lifting from his shoulders. But as he neared the final stretch, a strange sound made him freeze. The sound of a low, guttural voice. An alien voice. His eyes widened in horror as he turned to see a patrol of 4 aliens standing in his path, their weapons drawn. They had detected him. They had been waiting for him. Jason's mind raced, and for a split second, he considered making a run for it. But he knew better. The aliens were fast, and if he ran, he wouldn't make it far. Instead, he dropped to the ground, pulling himself behind a shattered console. His breath hitched as he tried to slow his heartbeat. If he was caught now, all would be lost. His hands trembled, but he forced himself to stay still. The aliens' voices grew closer, their footsteps methodical as they advanced. Jason could hear them murmuring in their strange language, their sharp features scanning the area for any sign of movement. He pressed himself further into the corner, his back to the cold metal, as he watched them pass by, just feet from where he was hiding. His body was rigid, his muscles aching with tension, but he remained motionless. The aliens seemed to grow more frustrated. One of them barked an order in their language, and the others responded in unison, moving back toward the entrance. The closest one, however, lingered for a moment longer, as if sensing something amiss. It stepped forward cautiously, its glowing eyes narrowing as it scanned the room. Jason held his breath, praying that the alien would leave. For a moment, it seemed as though the alien would turn around, but then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it backed away. The patrol moved out, leaving Jason in silence once again. He exhaled deeply, the air rushing from his lungs as relief flooded his body. His hands were slick with sweat, his heart pounding in his chest. But there was no time to waste. He couldn't afford to dwell on the close call. The aliens were still out there, and Jason knew he had to make it to the surface. With a final, quiet movement, he crept toward the exit, His fingers brushed against the cool, cracked metal of the door as he slowly pushed it open. It creaked, but only slightly. He glanced out into the darkness beyond and saw the silhouettes of the alien ships hovering overhead, their lights casting a strange glow over the ruined city. Jason stepped into the open, his heart racing again as he moved toward the shadows of the nearby building. He wasn't out of danger yet, but he was closer than ever before. He had done it. He had struck a blow against the invaders. The jamming device was working. The aliens' command system was down, and their patrols were disoriented. The humans still had a chance. As Jason slipped into the darkness of the city's wreckage, he allowed himself one moment of quiet satisfaction. He had done his part. He had shown them that humanity's resolve could not be broken. The aliens may have thought they had won, but Jason knew better. Rule number 1, never give up. As long as that rule held true, humanity could survive. The fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. And Jason was ready. Jason's heart raced as he sprinted through the debris-strewn streets, the weight of the world on his shoulders. The aliens had made a grave mistake by underestimating humanity's resilience, and now, for the first time in weeks, he had hope. The communication jamming device he had planted was causing chaos within the alien ranks, disrupting their operations. But Jason knew it wouldn't last forever. The aliens would figure out what was happening soon, and they would send everything they had to crush him, and anyone else who dared resist. But for now, humanity had a window, a fleeting moment where the invaders were vulnerable. Jason had to make it count. As he weaved through the shattered remnants of buildings, his mind raced. He thought of the survivors hiding in bunkers, the last pockets of human resistance scattered across the ruins of their cities. His mission wasn't over. He had to get the message to them. He had to let them know that the aliens were not invincible. His footfalls were steady but urgent, each step carrying him further into the heart of the destroyed city. He didn't know how much time he had before the aliens regained control of their systems, but he wasn't about to waste it. Every second mattered. The city around him was a ghost town, the silence broken only by the faint hum of alien ships above and the distant sounds of their troops searching for survivors. It was eerie. Once, this city had been alive, bustling with people going about their daily lives. Now it was nothing but a graveyard of human civilization. Jason had witnessed it all: the collapse of the military, the fall of entire cities, the screams of his fellow humans as they were taken away by the invaders. It was a nightmare that never seemed to end. But he couldn't dwell on that now. He had a mission, a goal. Ahead, a shadow shifted. Jason froze, his hand instinctively reaching for the weapon at his side. The aliens had gotten smarter. They were hunting in smaller, more efficient patrols now, and they were getting better at tracking down any humans that remained. Jason's breath caught in his throat as he waited, his pulse pounding in his ears. He crouched low behind a stack of concrete debris, keeping perfectly still. He peered around the edge, his eyes scanning the area. A group of alien soldiers walked past, their heads held high, their eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. They were on high alert. Their search for him, no, for anyone, had grown more intense in the last few days. Jason's fingers tightened around the grip of his weapon. He had been in tight situations before, but this was different. There were no second chances. If he was caught now, everything would be over. Humanity's hope would be gone. As the aliens passed, he exhaled a quiet breath and slowly crept out from behind his cover. He had to keep moving. He had to reach the hidden resistance cells before the aliens regained control. Jason knew the alien commanders would realize the communication disruption was no accident. They would hunt for the source, and when they found it, they would make an example of whoever was responsible. He darted across the street, staying low, his senses on high alert. Every sound, every movement, was a potential threat. The night seemed to press in on him, dark and suffocating. His mind kept going back to the same thought. Humanity had one chance. One shot to show the aliens that Earth would not go quietly into the night. After what felt like an eternity, Jason finally reached the underground bunker. The door was heavy and rusted, but it held firm. He knocked in a prearranged pattern, 3 short taps, followed by 2 long ones. The door creaked open, revealing a darkened passageway beyond. Inside, a small group of resistance fighters waited. They were a ragtag group, just like Jason, but they had a fire in their eyes. They weren't willing to give up without a fight. Jason could see their hope, their belief that victory was still possible. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to feel it too. "Is it done?" One of the fighters, a woman named Alina, asked. Her voice was steady, but Jason could hear the underlying tension. They all knew what was at stake. Jason nodded, his chest heaving from the exertion. The jamming device is in place. They're disoriented, confused. The aliens can't communicate properly right now. Alina's eyes widened. "You did it. You actually did it." She seemed almost in disbelief, as if she hadn't allowed herself to hope that this day would come. "Now we need to make sure we use the time wisely," Jason said, shaking his head. "We can't let them regain control. We have to hit them hard, and we have to do it fast." Another fighter, a young man named Durek, spoke up. "We've got a small army of survivors holed up in the outskirts of the city. If we can reach them, we can start organizing a real resistance, but we'll need reinforcements." "Then we get reinforcements," Jason said. "We're not going to wait for someone else to come save us. We do it ourselves." Alina nodded. "You're right. We've got to act now, before the aliens can regroup. I'll send out the call to the other resistance cells. If we can get them to move, we can create a diversion, maybe even take down one of their ships." Jason clenched his fists. "It's not enough to just survive anymore. We need to make them pay. We need to show them that Earth isn't theirs for the taking." Alina looked at him with determination in her eyes. "You're right. We're not going to wait for death. We're going to make our stand now." Jason's mind flashed back to the alien soldiers he had narrowly escaped. They had thought they were untouchable. They had believed humanity was weak, broken, and divided. But they had underestimated one thing: the human spirit. The resistance fighters began to prepare, gathering what weapons and supplies they could. Jason's thoughts raced as he reviewed the battle plan in his mind. He knew it wouldn't be easy. The aliens were relentless, and their forces were vast. But there was something the invaders couldn't predict: the will of humanity to survive, to fight back. Jason stood at the center of the room, looking around at the faces of his comrades. These were the last of Earth's defenders, and they weren't going to fall without a fight. "Let's show them what humans are made of," Jason said, his voice low but filled with purpose. The room erupted in quiet determination. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about taking back their world. It was about proving to the aliens that humanity would never, ever give up. And as the group moved toward the entrance of the bunker, ready to strike, Jason knew that the war was far from over. This was just the beginning. The aliens had thought they had already won, but one human had shown them they were wrong. And now the fight for Earth's future was about to get even more intense. Jason crouched low in the shadows, his breath slow and steady. The air was thick with tension, and every muscle in his body was coiled like a spring, ready to snap. His eyes darted between the dim lights of the destroyed city streets, and he strained to listen for any movement in the night. The streets that once teemed with life were now nothing but silent ruins, the echoes of alien patrols reverberating through the air. The jamming device he had activated earlier was still causing chaos in their command structure, but Jason knew it wouldn't last much longer. The aliens were smart. They would adapt. And when they did, everything would return to their relentless, unforgiving pace. It was time to move. He slipped through the streets, his movements fluid, avoiding the open spaces where the alien ships loomed ominously overhead. Each passing moment felt like a countdown to disaster. Jason knew he had little time to regroup with the other resistance fighters. If the aliens managed to regain control of their communication grid, they would be able to respond to the human resistance with overwhelming force. And that would mean the end for everyone. His heart pounded in his chest, but he kept his head clear. Rule number 1. Never give up. No matter the odds, no matter how overwhelming the enemy seemed, Jason had learned one truth in this war. Survival came from never giving in. It was that simple. His eyes fixed on a dilapidated building in the distance, a former stronghold for the military, before it was abandoned in the wake of the invasion. He knew it would be a perfect place to meet up with the rest of the fighters. The location had been used as a rallying point for weeks, and Jason had to believe that the survivors still held strong there. He couldn't allow himself to think otherwise. If he did, there would be no reason to keep moving, to keep fighting. As he neared the building, he took a moment to check his surroundings. His fingers gripped the weapon at his side, not out of fear, but out of necessity. The aliens had proven time and time again that they would stop at nothing to hunt down every last human. But Jason wouldn't be another casualty of their relentless pursuit. Not today. Not ever. The building ahead looked like a shell of its former self. Walls that once stood tall and proud were now crumbled into rubble. Windows that once looked out over a thriving city were shattered and abandoned. But Jason wasn't here for the remnants of the past. He was here for the future, the one the aliens hadn't taken from humanity yet. He moved cautiously, stepping carefully over the broken concrete. The moonlight filtered through the cracks in the building's structure, casting eerie shadows across the ground. The air was thick with the smell of dust and decay, the remnants of a world that had been invaded, conquered, and nearly lost. He reached the entrance and hesitated for a moment, listening carefully. The silence was deafening. No alien patrols in sight, at least for now. He pushed the heavy door open, the creak of the hinges loud in the stillness. His hand hovered over his weapon, ready for anything. But as he stepped inside, the faint sound of voices reached his ears. Relief washed over him. He wasn't alone. A few feet in front of him, a small group of resistance fighters had gathered, their faces grim but determined. They were ready. Jason recognized most of them. Elena, Derek, and a few others from the last mission they had worked on together. They were survivors, just like him. The war had stripped them of everything: homes, families, normalcy. But it had given them something more important in return: the will to fight. Jason, Elena said as she stepped forward, her expression a mix of relief and determination. You made it back. Jason nodded, but his eyes scanned the group quickly. Is everyone accounted for? He asked, his voice low but urgent. We're all here, Derek replied, his voice steady. The others are getting ready. We'll strike when the time's right. Jason's eyes flicked to the floor for a moment, lost in thought. We don't have much time, he said, his voice sharp. The jamming device won't hold for long. The aliens will adapt. Once they regain control, we'll be back to square one. We need to hit them hard, fast, and we will. Elena interrupted, her eyes narrowing with resolve. We've got a few small squads scattered around the outskirts of the city. If we can get everyone to move in time, we can create enough chaos to break their grip on the city. Jason took a deep breath. This was their chance. But there was no room for mistakes. One wrong move, one misstep, and it could all be over. Okay, he said finally. Get the signal out. We attack at dawn. The element of surprise is our best weapon. If we can strike their command center, we might be able to force them to pull back. We won't have much time once the jamming effect wears off. Everyone needs to be in position. This is our shot. We take it now, or we don't take it at all. Elena nodded, her face set in a hard line. Understood. We'll move out. Jason glanced at the rest of the fighters. They all knew the risks, the danger that lay ahead. But they also knew what was at stake. They had come this far, fought this hard, and they weren't about to stop now. Remember rule number 1, Jason said, his voice low but filled with conviction. Never give up, no matter what. The group nodded, a quiet but powerful agreement passing between them. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for something more, something the aliens couldn't take. They were fighting for their home, for humanity. Jason turned toward the exit, his mind focused, his steps steady. They would hit the aliens at their weakest point. They would force them to face the one thing they had underestimated: humanity's ability to rise when it had nothing left to lose. The streets outside were silent, the faint hum of alien patrols now distant. Jason could almost feel the weight of the coming storm in the air, the calm before the storm. He didn't know how long they had before the aliens regrouped, but he did know one thing: this would be the last fight. This was their chance to take back their world, and Jason was ready to lead them into battle. The aliens had thought they had already won, but they hadn't accounted for one thing: the unbreakable will of a human heart. Jason's heart. And that would be their downfall. Jason's boots thudded softly against the ground as he moved through the abandoned alleyways of the city, his mind racing with plans and possibilities. The night was thick with silence, but the weight of impending danger was always there, lurking just beyond the veil of shadows. Every corner held the potential for discovery. Every crack in the ruins might conceal an alien soldier waiting to pounce. But right now, he had to focus. There was no time for fear or hesitation. The jamming device he had planted earlier had given humanity a sliver of hope, a tiny window of opportunity that wouldn't last long. And in that window, Jason had to act. He wasn't alone. His squad, the last remnants of human resistance, were scattered in the shadows, preparing for the attack that would change everything. They had to strike while the aliens were disoriented, still trying to figure out what had gone wrong. If they waited too long, the aliens would adapt and all their efforts would be in vain. Jason pushed forward, his fingers brushing the handle of his weapon, though he wasn't sure he would even need it. The city was eerily still, but the presence of the aliens was like a ghost that hovered in the air, a constant reminder that humanity was outnumbered and outgunned. Still, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that this was their moment, their one shot at turning the tide. As he reached the meeting point, a broken-down building that had once been a central hub for military communications, he spotted the others already gathering. Elena stood by the corner, her arms crossed, her sharp eyes scanning the surroundings. Derek was fiddling with his rifle, preparing for what would surely be the toughest battle of their lives. "We ready?" Jason asked, his voice barely more than a whisper, but it carried the weight of everything they had endured to get to this point. Elena nodded, her expression unwavering. "We've got the teams in position. Everyone's prepped. The other resistance cells are already on their way. This is it. We hit them hard and fast, or we're dead." Jason's gaze shifted over the cityscape, where alien ships hovered silently in the sky, their alien blue glow casting an eerie light over the desolate streets. The once bustling metropolis had been reduced to ruins, a silent testament to the invaders' power. But Jason's resolve remained unbroken. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about proving to the aliens that humanity would not bow to them. Not ever. Derek spoke up, his voice thick with urgency. "We've got about an hour before they figure out the jammer's position. Once they find it, they'll come for us. We can't waste time." Jason gave a grim nod. "Then let's make it count." The plan was simple but dangerous. Jason and his team would infiltrate the alien command center, the heart of their operations in the city. If they could cripple their communications, destroy their central control systems, it would buy the resistance more time to launch a full-scale offensive. But even if they succeeded, they'd have to fight their way out. Alien forces would be swarming the area, searching for the source of the disruption. There was no turning back now. They moved in silence, keeping to the shadows, weaving through the alleyways and over the rubble-strewn streets. The city seemed to hold its breath as the group made their way toward the alien stronghold. Every step they took was a step closer to the moment that would either break them or give them a chance to win. Jason's thoughts flashed back to earlier, to the moment when he had first realized that humanity still had a fighting chance, when he had broken into the alien command center and planted the jamming device. The aliens had thought they were untouchable, their victory assured. But in that moment, when Jason had taken control of their communication network, he had proven to them just how wrong they were. Now, humanity had a real chance, but only if they could act swiftly. The alien stronghold loomed ahead, a dark, foreboding structure that was as much a symbol of their dominance as it was a fortress of terror. Jason could feel his pulse quicken. The gravity of what they were about to do settled over him like a weight, but there was no fear, only determination. It was either this or humanity would fall. At the base of the stronghold, Elena signaled for them to stop. She pointed to a small access panel on the side of the building, half hidden by debris. "We go in through there," she whispered. "It'll lead us straight into their underground facility." Jason nodded. The element of surprise was key. If they could disable the guards and get to the control room, they could strike a blow that would reverberate across the entire alien operation. They approached the access panel carefully, with Derek taking the lead. His hands were steady as he manipulated the controls, bypassing the security system with practiced ease. A soft click signaled that they were in. The door creaked open, and the team slipped inside. The air inside the alien stronghold was thick and sterile, a stark contrast to the ruined city outside. They moved cautiously, keeping low to the ground as they navigated the narrow corridors, their footsteps muffled against the cold metal floor. Jason's breath echoed in the stillness, but he didn't let it distract him. His mind was sharp, focused. Every noise, every shift in the air, could mean danger. They reached a security checkpoint, and Jason held up his hand. The team stopped. Ahead, 2 alien guards stood watch, their weapons hanging loosely at their sides. It was too risky to move without taking them out. Jason's eyes scanned the area. There was no way around them. "Elena," he murmured. She nodded in understanding and moved silently toward the first guard. With swift precision, she knocked him unconscious with a quick strike to the back of the head. Derek handled the second guard, his movements equally fast and efficient. Within moments, the guards were neutralized, and the team continued forward. They reached the heart of the stronghold, the command center, a massive circular chamber filled with alien technology and consoles that flickered with strange symbols and lights. Jason couldn't help but be in awe of the sheer scale of it. This was the center of their operations, the nerve center of their invasion. The control panels hummed with power, and every device was connected, creating a network of communication that spanned across the planet. If they could shut this down, they could cripple the aliens' ability to coordinate their forces. But as they stepped inside the room, Jason's eyes widened in shock. There, in the center of the control room, stood an alien figure. Taller than the others, its body was adorned with intricate armor that glinted in the dim light. Its eyes locked onto Jason's, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Then the alien spoke. "You've made a mistake, human," it said, its voice cold and mechanical. "You will regret this." Jason's heart skipped a beat, but he didn't flinch. This was it, the final confrontation. He didn't hesitate. With a fierce shout, Jason lunged forward, the rest of the team right behind him. The battle for Earth's future was about to begin. And Jason knew that no matter what happened, they couldn't stop now. The aliens had thought they had already won. But one human had just reminded them rule number 1. Never underestimate the resilience of humanity. The fight for Earth's future was on.